Hello and welcome back to day 2 of this week-long virtual edition of CREWCONNECT Global. I hope many of you were able to enjoy the 3 excellent sessions we had yesterday, but if you didn't, you can catch up on demand through this event platform. So just revisit that agenda page and watch the content that you missed at your leisure. We've got some great sessions lined up for you over the next couple of hours, all themed broadly around recruitment and retention. So in just a moment, I'll hand you over to Torbjorn Eid to introduce our first panel discussion and guide you through the session. But before I do, let me remind you just quickly about the platform that you're in. We'd love your interaction today, so please do use the Q&A and chat functions on the right-hand side of your screen to send your questions in, and Torbjorn and the panel will do their best to answer as many as they can. And if you're viewing full screen, you might need to minimize your screen to see that chat box. You can also use this platform to find each other, other attendees, other participants, and connect virtually and do some virtual networking as best you can. Finally, I want to say a big thank you to all of our sponsors. You can find all of their company profiles in this platform, learn more about their service propositions and connect with them directly, so please do so. So that's enough from me. It gives me great pleasure to hand you over to Klaveness Ship Management Vice President Torbjorn Eid.
Good morning, everybody. Most likely good afternoon somewhere too. Welcome to this day number 2, which is basically recruitment and retention. But with the current time we are in, what also hits recruitment and retention figures is, of course, also COVID. So we will use part of the time to look into that, and then not least how we can solve the cost and the cost equation that COVID actually has become. And with me in the panel, I have Praveen Shukla. He is the crewing director of the Valum Group. I have also with me Henrik Jensen, and Henrik is the founder and managing director of Danica Maritime. Konstantinos Polis, he's a general manager of Epsilon in Greece. And then finally, Ish Beauty, who today is the global director and is working for the oil and gas consulting services. So welcome to all of you, and it's very nice to see you. So, Praveen, for us working with crewing, we are always challenged on our costs. And when we thought we were not going to be challenged on our costs because we did our job quite well, COVID came. So could you give us a short or give us your views on how you have experienced the past 20 months?
Well, as you know, industry-wide, when the COVID came, initially nobody really knew how long this is going to last and what to do. So the first we saw everywhere was a paralysis. Many companies, in fact, actually put a moratorium on crew changes. Different companies took different approach. At Valum, we decided to continue with the crew change, but the crew change was hardly possible in the beginning. As we go through the crisis, you must have realized the charter flights started. People started to get into action because the seafarers had to be signed off. There was a major problem on board with the seafarers getting delayed. A lot of industry outcry was there. And end of 2020, when we look back into OPEXs, there was a shock. The shock was to a tune of almost 20 to 25% on top of OPEX. So huge costs that came together with crew changes and quarantines and COVID-related stuff. So 2021 was a year of challenge, actually, where people tried to balance this cost as well as the crew changes. Fortunately, there are more ports open for crew changes. Vaccines came about. And yeah, we are still continuing with COVID. Not sure when this is going to end. My prediction is unless we see 85% to 90% of the world being vaccinated, which is far from now, this is not going to be an end. So the challenges are going to continue.
May I then ask also, Praveen, before we go to Henrik, doing ship management, how challenging has it been to reach out to your customers and principals and trying to, inform them and explain to them the situation you are in and what you need them to join you with?
I believe it was really a matter of the preparedness. Some companies were better prepared than others. Some companies were on cloud-based solutions. They were very well engaged with their clients, and at this time, the trust, the rapport, the continuous communication, the engagement with the clients as well as with the seafarers, it really came to forefront. So the companies like ourselves, and I'm sure many of the others who were prepared, who were always talking to clients, I think it wasn't a big difficulty. We kind of swiftly moved into remote working locations, but it is not exactly same as sitting across table, having a cup of coffee, and looking into each other and then talking about some business as well as personal matters. So yes, it's a bit formal, but it was doable.
And then, Henrik, you do have a very large portion of your crews coming from Eastern Europe and being a crew manager. May I ask how you have felt this on how the temperature has been for Danica during the past 20 months? I think we need to unmute you, Chris.
So now it's better, yeah?
No,
sorry. Yeah, when you say the temperature, I think one thing is of course on the ships, and I think I can confirm what was just said. Okay, we don't have much Asian crew. We I think 95% of our crews are from Eastern Europe, and at least the travel situation for them has been except for last year when it was in the spring or early summer last year when everything was closed down around the world. Then at least if the ports are open, then our crew has been able to travel, and that does not mean it was cheap. Yeah. So in 2020. Actually, in 2020, we met most of the budgets for the ships we had in crew management. Coincidentally, I would say, because the number of crew changes was reduced a lot, and crew was, of course, overdue on board. So I think we did about half of the crew changes we had in the budgets, and they were double as costly. So at the end, it all flattened out in 2020, and it was in balance. In 21, it's a different situation. More ports are open. Airlines start flying again, airfares are up, PCR test, the isolation costs for the crew before the join on the joining ports and so on are high, and it's clear that I think in some cases it's astronomical what it costs to make a crew change. So that's the situation, and I'm afraid that you ask here how to manage it, that will be difficult in the future, and there will only be a solution to it, I guess, yes, as when everybody's vaccinated and booster vaccinated, and also I think when there is a cure for COVID, yeah, which will take another 2 years, I understand. So this is a situation we're going to live with for some time, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I think unfortunately you are very right on. And but Kostas, for Epsilon, how has your past been now with this virus hitting us?
Yeah, it has been a challenging year, of course. It was really shocking, especially in the beginning last year. For us, it was an investment dilemma, I think. It made us realize that COVID created a challenge and an opportunity alike. And at the end of the day, I would like to approach COVID, I would like to frame all that is happening to us as an investment dilemma. Initially, it is a matter of protocol because it's a health and safety issue. So it is a matter of following the protocols and the guidelines from international organizations, supranational entities, and so on, and national COVID authorities as well. However, we soon realized that we had to move beyond this minimum institutional requirement in order to properly tackle the issue. We had to move away from it because if we didn't, we would face a problem, and the problem would be faced for one simple reason: because of the institutional complexity and the institutional contradictions, actually, in terms of how one was supposed to deal with COVID, especially at the beginning. And now things become somehow a bit better, but the responsiveness of the international shipping community and the international governments has been very, very slow. For example, many ship owners have been very, very disappointed with the responsiveness by the IMO. So for us in the beginning, it was not whether we would cut costs down, because it indeed increased, as Praveen said, it also increased our OPEX approximately 20%, but whether we will see it as an opportunity to do something beyond this minimum institutional requirement. Because if we don't, and if we are trapped into these institutional contradictions and the regulatory framework, which was vague and nebulous, then we would find ourselves in a much more difficult situation. For example, cases on board at different locations all over the world. And at the end of the day, we would also demonstrate to our seafarers that we don't care. We don't take any additional precautions beyond what a national competent authority may say. So it opened up our eyes, and it made us think more widely, more holistically. And for us, it has been a genuinely positive exercise, to be honest, a very helpful exercise that made us rethink many of the things that we routinely do, and do them in a more efficient way.
No, and I think that sums up quite good. Is it another question then is it anything or any country or port that has surprised you from a positive side or from a negative side during the past year? Because in my world, when I have seen those ports and countries I thought would take a lead and make sure our crew members were taken well care of, they have kept us on the distance. Anyone there?
Well, I have a pragmatic, just one. I want to be pragmatic, and I want to give credit to national governments, because I truly understand their concerns. I may somehow seem to accuse them of not taking proper action or lacking responsiveness, but I do understand the pragmatic concerns. For example, one of the countries was having elections. So we were all, well, it's Singapore, and as far as I remember, they had elections coming. And I'm sure that the national government is always, and all the political parties, when they are about to have elections, they're very anxious of doing the right thing and appearing legitimate in the eyes of their citizens. So we may accuse national governments, but overall, there has been a very limited window as to what they could possibly do.
No, and I agree. I will not accuse, and then we know that the politician's first and foremost priority is his own population or her own population. So I think we understand that. But I do agree. I mean, some countries have surprised me in maybe a certain lack of flexibility. So Ashish, what's your take on this? I mean, you've had some few positions in the past years, and you've seen, how this has developed. So what's your view on the COVID as an equation cost in ship management?
I think firstly, good morning and good afternoon or good evening from wherever you're joining. And thank you for that question. The thing is, for us, being in the present position, we are highly supporting digitalization. And COVID, just like Kostas mentioned, for us, it has been a kind of a catalyst for change. So having said that, the challenges for crew change are predominantly there, even as of today. The clients that we work with have exactly the same problems. Doing the simplest crew change could not only mean additional cost, but additional time and resources. I think this situation that we all are in, or the industries, and when it started, we all predicted that it might get over in a couple of weeks, couple of months, even a year. Now we are down to almost close to 1.5, 2 years. And as also Henrik mentioned, I think from our side also, we feel the situation is there to last. And we just have to try to find a reasonable and optimal way to work in this new norm, as we call it. And that has been our key focus, and supporting our clients with digitalization and solutions, which can help them to kind of prepare for the next years to come, and especially 2022, which will be a difficult year in terms of cost and ship management, considering that the crew change crisis might well continue into quite some part of 2022.
Yeah, and the digitalization, I think, has basically what COVID has done. I think it's fast-tracked the development that we all anticipated would come, but maybe not this quick, even though many already are there. But another thing on if we just do the training then as a part of the retention and recruitment, taking into account that our sailors many of our sailors come from areas where it is less developed. And we do see that time on board is quite labor intensive. How do you view then training at home for sailors in areas where you have actually quite poor connectivity? And how do we link this together when you look at the big picture in the future, where you actually, from the minute you scramble your crew and he's still at home until he actually comes on board, and you relate this to training?
I think the solution to this is everyone across the industry has moved to what called a hybrid training model, where certain aspects are done online. Online training is not will never replace classroom training in certain ways, but it is there to support that. What we are trying to focus is the trainings that we are trying to develop or work with our clients is to have the minimum bandwidth, so they don't use as much internet as a very heavy program would use, but still provide a learning experience. For example, trainings that we are trying to provide or work with our clients are basically based on a web-based browser, which means that it is as simple as opening a website on your laptop. And the whole goal of doing this is to try to reduce the bandwidth, especially considering that in certain countries or certain regions, the internet connection will not be so strong or might not be so heavy bandwidth, right? So we are really trying to focus on that, but it still remains a challenge, to be honest, because even as of today, we have areas or locations where the internet connectivity is really bad. We then encourage seafarers in the past to go to like an internet cafe or something. But during the pandemic, that also has been a very difficult challenge because many internet cafes in those regions were closed because of social distancing rules and various COVID restrictions.
And that leads me to in Columbus Shipmanagement, we initiated a COVID management plan back in March 2020. And one of the parts we had was, of course, isolation at dedicated hotels prior to our sailors leaving their country of domicile. And by doing that, we first of all tried to make sure that people were negative prior to traveling to the country of embarkation. But for us, it was actually also a very good opportunity to give our sailors a very good network and to do as much training as long as they were in isolation. And the beauty of this was that we actually today have around a 93% completion of all CBTs in our training program on our sailors on board. But by doing this, we are also exhausting our sailors. And then it's a matter of how do you balance the requirements on this versus their time on board? Because Praveen, I'm quite sure that you had a plan in place for taking care of your people before they departed the vessels. And when you're then talking about retention and recruitment, that becomes a difficult thing, isn't it?
Indeed, it is. Yeah. So much like any other company, I think, like Ashish was mentioning, the challenges are same. We all are faced with the same challenge. And the biggest one here was really to keep the people motivated. Not just, I'm not just talking about seafarers, but also of the shore staff, because on the crewing side and across the ship management side, people were overworked. They've been working day and night in order to support the seafarers, in order to make the crew changes take place as efficiently as possible. But for the seafarers, it was even more difficult, because when they go on board, really they are worried about what's happening back at home. So the engagement, a very basic tenet of humanity, which is compassion, emotional intelligence, that came at the forefront. I think pretty much every company communicated with the seafarers, trying to calm their anxieties and just make sure they feel supported. And with that actually came the initiatives for the well-being and the mental health and other platforms that actually came about. So yeah, someone mentioned that COVID has been a catalyst. Yeah, it has been catalyst in many ways. Actually, it actually brings us back to our roots, where we understand, for managing people, you need people, and you need to manage them in a way the human beings like to be managed, with transparency, with respect, with equality, and with as much support as possible.
And then Henrik Pravin is mentioning the pressure on his crewing officers ashore, and I would take it that you also have experienced this amongst your colleagues in your manning agencies.
I think we can only confirm this. I mean, I don't like to see that my crew managers are sitting here working to 10 o'clock night day after day. Yeah? And it's not only, I think, the problems in the crewing departments ashore. It's not only that it's before it was basically to make sure that the people signed the contract and they had a ticket, to make it very simple. But today you have to send them in hotels, PCR test here again when they arrive. Off-signers has to go for PCR test and all this, and isolations and so on. So there's a huge logistics around getting crew on board, yeah, and that is creating a workload for the crewing managers, and unfortunately we cannot add resources there, because it's a professional thing, and you need to know what you're doing. You can just not add new people to it, and that is really the workload in the crewing departments is a problem also.
I agree, and then you can say that retention and recruitment in the industry in general, especially for us working in crewing, becomes a challenge, because we're now not talking only about the sailors, but we're talking about the professionals ashore having to deal with this. And I have cases, where we have former sailors now working in the office, and the first time they were to travel, they were wondering, where is my crewing officer arranging this for me? And then, of course, we had to tell our new colleagues in the office that, well, now you're working ashore, you have to do it yourself. And then, of course, it was, whoa, how do I do this? So, but it all hangs together, and then cost us with this in mind, and the retention and recruitment. Where do you see us going with our sailors? Will they at all like to sail?
Well, I think first we have to solve an ethical dilemma that emerges, which is mandatory vaccination. I think that's the key to the solution, any possible resolution to the emerging scenario is whether we will vaccinate all seamen and whether this will be mandatory. It is commercially mandating in the sense that more and more ship owners demand that and charterers demand that, but still the dilemma is there, because we have resistance. So we have a lot of resistance from many seafarers for different reasons. On the one hand, we have a resistance from many seafarers because they don't trust science. On the other hand, we have a trust in science, but we don't have a trust in several countries on national governments by seafarers. So we have two levels of resistance coming from two different sources. The one is more fundamental, having to trust science overall, which makes it a huge impediment that needs to be overcome. The other one is still important and structural, trusting your own government, but it can be somehow resolved through international means. For example, we have vaccination hubs all over the world, emerging, popping out, mushrooming. So I'm confident that we can solve this lack of trust towards national governments. Let me give you an example. In the Philippines, we have a trust in the national vaccination system, but up until now, we didn't have a lot of vaccines in the country. Now that the availability of vaccines in the country is in place, I'm confident that due to the fact that Filipino seafarers do trust science, the vaccines themselves, and they do trust their own government, I'm sure that the vaccination rate will pick up and we will see results quite soon. The vast majority of the country, of the seafaring population at least, because it is a priority segment, will be vaccinated. However, we have to resolve this overarching tension the lack of trust towards science and the lack of trust towards national governments, because it is a duality that cannot be easy to overcome. And so this should be the priority. We need to reinstill trust in science, and we need to work with national governments in order to make seafarers feel confident that they are doing the right thing by getting vaccinated.
And I think also what you say about vaccination and the trust in governments is quite essential. We are currently, luckily, some of our vessels are calling countries where we trust the sourcing of the vaccines. But of course, many vessels are calling countries where you don't necessarily trust the sourcing of the vaccines, which then would make you hesitate in letting your sailors, whom actually are employed by you, take this. So I perfectly agree. And then, you know, another challenge with the vaccines is how long do they last? When will you have to retake? What requirements will certain governments and countries and ports impose in the future? Your corona vaccination card, will it be valid and for how long? And then, of course, depending what country your vessel last called, there might be many restrictions and imposements on that. So it is, again, as we've said in the very beginning, quite complex. Ashish, vaccination, what do you see on that? Do you agree that it's the way out of this?
I think for us, or from what we see and when we're discussing to our clients, is vaccination is definitely one solution or one kind of a part to the puzzle. I think it's also important is how these vaccinations are tracked. Many a times we have seen recently that a certain seafarer of one nationality has taken a certain vaccination, and that's not considered valid in another country. The challenge of this is, unless and until we have like a vaccination certificate which is valid across the globe and across the industry, we will keep facing these challenges, because certain vaccinations may or may not be approved in certain countries. And I think there was a classic example the other day where I was talking to one of my clients, and they had their seafarer had a vaccination from one country. He was allowed to fly in, and then when he reached there, they said the certificate is not valid. And this is just to give an example. I'm sure if we ask across this room, or if we ask our audience, there would be thousands of cases like this. The challenge here is that if the vaccination is not only giving the vaccination, but having the right certificate or one certificate. So I think it's very important that we as an industry align and then request the authorities on what we feel, because many a times I feel we are requesting the authorities, but not as a unified approach. This was also discussed briefly in the yesterday morning session, where it was mentioned that I think we as an industry need to align and then approach the authorities so they know what they can do for us. So I think for vaccination, it has to be like one digital certificate, which should be considered valid for seafarers. Talking about an example, we don't hear airline crew having this problem, but our shipping crew are having this problem every single port, every single country with vaccinations.
Yeah, and then in international alignment, I think we've seen many attempts to get that, and many protocols being signed in the past. And I think it's fair to say that IMO and other maritime organizations have tried, but it seems like we are constantly being held back because sailors are not given the priority they deserve. But do you think, Praveen, as we go ahead, there will be a higher and higher understanding for this, that we need to align it? And do you think we at all will succeed in aligning when you see how many different parties have an interest in this?
If you look at the current scene, I think the global situation for the availability of WHO approved vaccines is relatively thin across the globe. Certain developed nations will have it, they already have it, while other countries are struggling. Even in Eastern Europe, if you're taking seafarers from there, Russia is one of the biggest source of seafarers. They are using Sputnik vaccines, which are still not WHO approved for now. It's a matter of time when we would know whether these are going to be approved or not. But what if a seafarer has already taken 2 doses, and then are they supposed to take 2 more doses of another vaccine? So this challenge is going to continue, but I believe the industry forces are coming together. IMO has done some work, and as well as other shipping industries as well. But I believe there is a need for creating urgency, because it has been a slow progress. The sign up from the governments, even though they sign up to NETCHU declaration or to IMO, they are already members of IMO. But when you see the action is actually not strong enough, which actually can show some tangible results. So the vaccines need to be available. Their recognition has to come relatively quickly, and this COVID passport has to become a reality. Now, some of the airlines have signed up for this, but I don't know how many shipping companies actually, or shipping industries have actually signed up on it.
Yeah. So, Henrik, if we now agree, and I think we pretty much do, that in the foreseeable or unforeseeable future, this will be with us, and it will remain there as a cost. How do we work differently, and how do we approach other cost elements in order to make sure that we still manage safe and secure operations for our principals? And at the same time, we know with 50 to 60% of OPEX being related to crew, how do we balance this so we are still able to go to our principal and say, this is as cost effective as we can manage? Any thoughts?
Yeah, that's a good question.
I'm putting you on the spot.
Tell me where the ships are, and I can tell you what the cost will be. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but I think I unfortunately I must say I don't think there's all the Neptune declarations and all these things, and the to wait for the industry or everybody coming together. I think the COVID will be over before, unfortunately, will be over before the industry gets some standards set up. I think that's maybe a reality. We of course also signed these Neptune declarations, and sometimes I wonder what happened more there. It's a piece of paper, and some people then maybe think we have done what we could do. So I am afraid that this is going to be down to the individual ship owners, ship managers, crew managers, or whatever, to deal with this for a long time. And there is no, I mean, we one thing which will restore maybe the cost, or get the cost down again. The problem is now that at least the intercontinental airlines, there are not too much competition at the moment, right? And the airfares are high, at least outside Europe. In Europe, maybe there is a lot. I think I was reading. I think in Europe it's about the same number of passengers as before the COVID, and we see also the airfares in Europe are getting down again. But on the long distance flights, until the competition restored between the airlines and the world start turning again, then I'm afraid we have the airlines will utilize the situation to charge what they can charge. So that's not really something we can manage. We have to convince your clients that the priority is, of course, they have obligation to bring the crew home when the contracts are finished, and we have to do it in the most economical way. And when we talk about cost here, it is not only the direct crew change cost, but in some cases ships are deviated, ships are waiting because we have to do the procedures to get the crew on board, create some waiting time, idle time for the ships also, right? So there is a lot of cost involved in it, and as I said, unfortunately, it's not going to go away. And I also wonder what we're doing as an industry, because a couple of weeks ago I traveled again, and first time I came to Greece again, and I realized a little bit later when I was sitting in the hotel, I saw that the crew from the airplane I came with, they also checked in the hotel, and I had the opportunity to ask them, how do you move around due to this COVID? And the captain there, he said, what's the problem? We show our somehow IATA airline crew passport, and we pass it through. I go in the hotel, go back, and they never had a problem for this. And I wonder what is wrong with the maritime industry. And when you go back again a little bit, step again to your question before, when you see some of the biggest flag states in the world, like Panama, they closed for the cruise changes in the Panama Canal for months this last year, yeah. And Singapore is a big flag state with a lot of, and you have all these kind of restrictions in the big flag states, own countries. I can understand in the beginning when the panic starts and the governments have to shut everybody. When in the UK somebody dies every minute from COVID, okay, the government say, you shut down everything. But after a couple of months, maybe we could get the risk management done and see there's no risk to pass a seaman in a bus from an airport to a ship. Yeah.
I would like to follow up on your meeting with Aircrew. We all along said when we had the piracy and Somalia was a big issue. We had vessels at anchor, vessels being held, sailors being captured ashore. And I know it was not a good joke, but we had a joke in the industry that if we had 20 airplanes sighted on an airfield in Somalia, there would be some higher attention to the challenge than when we had vessels anchored being kidnapped. So I think that pretty much shows the underestimation of our sailors, and perhaps also the underestimation our sailors have been subject to through many decades would be my statement, actually. So
I think Torbjørn, you should add to this also. I must also say I think the flag states have not been active enough to help solving these problems. Some reaction from the flag state were actually to suspend the MLC regulations that the maximum contract length is 11 months or something like this. Yeah. It's not really helpful for the seafarers sitting on board to get them home. Yeah? How can the ship comes in compliance again? But and I sometimes think about. I mean, okay, the shipping industry, we like to be a little bit in the shadow, right? But and it was mentioned, I don't know if the number is right, but it was mentioned there were 400,000 seafarers stranded on board at some stage, yeah? And I wonder if this was 400,000 Norwegian seafarers sitting on a Norwegian flag ship, what the Norwegian government then would have reacted to this, yeah?
Yeah.
If somebody can understand what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're starting to get questions in from the audience, and I thought maybe the cost of hiring Filipino sailors too expensive due government-imposed quarantine. Have you resorted to other sources because of higher costs? I don't know, Praveen, would you basically recruit globally? In Klaveness, we're more pinpointed in few areas. Would you like to respond to that?
Sure. Indeed. Olam has almost 30% of our seafarers coming from Philippines. We have our own 2 recruitment companies based in Philippines. So we are heavily invested. And it's not just because it's a large crewing supply nations. I think it's largely because you get very resilient seafarers from there. Now, coming to the question, answer is a no. I think it would be short-sighted of any company because of quarantine restrictions or extra cost of few days into quarantine, then the companies actually start to change seafarers' nationality. Generally, it has happened during COVID, mainly because there was a need to sign off the seafarers from ship, stranded seafarers. And at that time, many companies actually resorted to whosoever could travel to the ship and let's sign off this guy. And that's how companies, both ownership as well as management companies, ended up with mixed nationality crew on board. But this is not intentional, that because the Filipinos or the Chinese seafarers have been having long quarantine. So that's why let's choose another nationality.
And it's in my opinion, it's a too easy way out and then we're back, to one of the things Kostas is looking at, and that is, the crew shortages that are, people claim there is a crew shortage. I've always said there isn't. It's just a matter of where you choose to recruit it from. And then people might agree or disagree with me, but the fact of the matter is there are plenty of sailors on the globe. It's just a matter of where would you like to recruit them from and what would you like to pay them. So, but what's your take on this, Kostas?
Well, coming to the question itself, We didn't experience any problem because we avail of an international network. We are present in 9 different countries and we recruit people from many different nationalities. So this global network, the global structure that we have has helped us, has insulated us from the ramifications, the negative ramifications of the pandemic. So we are more or less on the safe side. We didn't feel the need to move away from one country and move to another in order to find solutions. We have done it indeed, but we have done it only sporadically whenever the pressure was huge and we had to find an immediate solution because of a case on board, for example. So it has been a sporadic response rather than a more fundamental change in the structure of my company, of Epsilon. And I think the companies that suffered most are the ones that have been historically dependent only on one source for their seafarers. Yes, I'm aware of companies who have been historically dependent on one country for their recruitment, sourcing and recruitment needs. And yes, these companies have suffered a lot and they were forced essentially to identify solutions elsewhere, but without having the necessary experience, the network, the skills, the access to those countries that would indeed facilitate it. So I agree with you, Torben. We don't have a crew shortage per se. We just need to expand our horizons. We need to see crewing as the global industry that it genuinely is, and not rely only on one source. I think it is one of the things that the pandemic helped us realize, that we need to have a much broader horizon, a much broader view of what crewing is all about. I do understand that historically speaking, some companies are linked with certain countries, and they have availed of that. They have seen the benefits of doing so, but unfortunately, external triggers such as a pandemic cause us to rethink our fundamental premises and think over again and again whether we are doing the right thing. We are adaptive beings anyway, and we have to adapt. We have to adapt to the new reality.
Yeah. Oh, I perfectly agree. I am with both of you. I have some comments, but I'll save them to later because I saw we have a new question from Wayne. And could the panel advise their thoughts on crewing numbers on board vessels? I understand these have been reduced during COVID. Will crew on board start to return to pre-COVID levels as travel and the world slowly starts to reopen? From discussions I've had, active seafarers, reductions in crew are causing extensive of work, hours on board, well-being, and job satisfaction. I'm thinking, Henrik, I would put that question in your lap.
Yeah, okay. I must say I think at the moment we do not have any vessels which are short-handed. It's okay. There can be somebody who was ill and signed off, or some family problems. During COVID last year, maybe there were some. If it was not possible to send out a new reliever, and the position was strictly not in the rank on board was strictly not in the minimum safe manning, and maybe not needed, or some maintenance work could be postponed, then it happened. But I think at the moment, and I think I know at the moment we are fully manned again. So that's over.
Yeah. From a Klaveness point of view, we have not reduced crew. Rather the opposite. We have tried to increase. Now the reason for that has of course been the operational pattern of the vessel. But I think what all of us discovered quite quickly when COVID started was that it's easier to get people off than on, and but you cannot continue taking people off at any given opportunity. Sooner or later, you have to do some changes. But my general impression when I speak to colleagues in the industry is that no one has on purpose taken down the number of crew on board as a cost-saving initiative. So that would be my short response on the question from Wayne, that I haven't experienced that among my peers that I've been speaking to. I don't know, Ashish, your end, if you've any comments on this.
I think from our side, we see it on the contrary. The reason for relieving crew were because they have been too far on board. So basically the well-being of the crew was thought, and in order to relieve them, they were relieved. Unfortunately, in the last year or also in 2020 and even this year, I'm sorry, there have been many instances where it's impossible to send a crew on board. Despite that, I know ship owners and ship managers personally who have still taken a decision to relieve the crew, but that is only considering the crew welfare of the crew who have been on board for way too long, some of them even more than 12 months.
Yes. And if your commercial department is constantly giving you less convenient ports, sooner or later you do have people who've been on board for more than 12 months, especially when they signed on with a 8 months plus minus one, which is the case for many nationalities. Because then also I'm thinking on the recruitment and retention when we're looking at the costs in the future, and there is no doubt that our principals will challenge us some years down the road. I'm quite sure they will. And when we reach that stage, we need to have a plan. And we do know that the length of contract varies a lot from country to country. Also, we do know that the two largest wage elements normally are related to wages and processing and travel. And that's where basically a large amount of the OPEX related to crew ends up. So when you're looking at sourcing areas in the future, would contract length, limited number of crew changes per year, would that be one item you would have on your tick-off list, Praveen?
If you look at the current practice, we have been almost 1 year, 8 months, or almost 2 years now into COVID. And you see these requests coming from ship owners where they want to offset some of these high repatriation costs by increasing the contract period. Now, they are not talking about increasing contract period for those crew who are already staying on board for 8 to 9 months. They're generally asking for those who go for 3 to 4 months. Now, on the other hand, if you ask the seafarers, they also realize that the biggest risk to them is not at the time when they are on ship. Biggest risk to them is at the time of traveling. This is the time when most of the seafarers actually have caught in past COVID. So there have been a lot of requests that we receive to extend the contracts as well. So this is kind of where we see there was a desire for seafarers as well to actually increase and do less traveling and less crew changes. Every time they would travel, they will have to stay in quarantine, and there were a lot of hassles, including PCR tests and other travel restrictions. So I think we have made an effort from our side to talk to some of the nationalities where the contract periods were very short, and we asked them. So yes, I agree with you. I think this is one of the venue where people are looking at, both to minimize the cost, but also to minimize the risk actually, and the effort and the resources which are required in order to do a single crew change.
No, I agree with you, Praveen. I think that's a very sensible statement. And you can imagine what we did with the COVID management plan in Klaveness was in the beginning when the Filipino authorities closed down, we were so afraid that we wouldn't get our Filipinos from the Mindanao district or the Visayas district into Manila in order to dispatch them. So we took them up out of fear that the government might close down. So we at least had them in Manila. And then all of a sudden, you had sailors in the hotel for quite some time before they actually started their contract. So there has been many of those dilemma situations. However, I think we are fortunate, at least in our company, that we have owners who have very much seen that when we take people into hotels, they have to be in good hotels. When we take people into hotels, they need to be in hotels where connectivity is not an issue. When we take them into hotels, we need to take them into hotels where they know they can feel safe and where the food and the accommodation is clean and safe. But you can imagine when you have 1 month at the hotel prior going on board, 8 months contract, you sign off in a country where they impose maybe 14 days to 3 weeks. And then the national government, when you come home, imposes another 10 days. I mean, how resilient are not our sailors? It's just, to be impressed, really. And I think the sad part is that many people really don't see how resilient and tough they are, and they are definitely not appreciated for what they deliver, in my opinion. I was just maybe on the side, but just an observation on what we
Fully
have
agree with you.
been
Yeah.
through. And then Ashish, on the training side, how do we secure that the skills and the Siemens skill set is kept at a current level, at an acceptable level with the digitalization? And what do you think about physical training as we go ahead?
I think, as I previously alluded, trainings have taken up a hybrid model, and this will continue, which means there will be part of the trainings may be done online or digitally, and parts done in simulators or in classroom. I think the goal here is not to see how we can be ready for now. The plan has to be drawn for the future. This is a very extensive topic which can be spoken separately, but we are talking about decarbonization. We are talking about zero carbon emissions. In order to reach there, we need the crew to be trained to operate these advanced vessels, which will be reaching zero carbon. A vessel will not reach zero carbon just with the machinery. I think it's important to understand that it's the crew who will make the vessel run smoothly to reach there. And also, just to add another point, as you mentioned, Torvald, I fully agree with your point, and I support that. I think we have not got enough attention as an industry before COVID. And this has not been for a few years, but a few decades, as you mentioned. I think seafarers are key workers, and this is what we need to highlight and inform everyone. We had a single incident of one of the vessels getting stuck in the biggest canal in the world, or the most important canal in the world, and we could see how that could change the geographics and the dynamics of global trade. So I think seafarers are in the forefront, or are the heart of the global trade. And I think it's important to make sure that we give them the right value and we treat them as key workers. And we should be pushing this agenda all the way up to IMO, ILO, to whatever level we can, because this is also what we owe to show to the future seafarers, where we will face a problem in recruitment in the future. Because if they see no actions have been taken, it would be very difficult to make this industry lucrative for the new generations or the young generations to join. We are already seeing quite a huge decline in interest for joining the industry. And I'm afraid that this will continue if we do not take actions immediately.
I think you are very correct, Ashish. I think our ability to retain and keep, and not least recruit, will be challenged in the future, because we're not a cohesive cohort in the maritime, if you like. We got a question in from Abdul Ghani. I understand he's a general secretary in Union of Seafarers in India. I'm not sure I agree with him that flag states haven't done much, because the flag state we predominantly use is Marshall Island, and we are very happy. So, but if we were to shake flag states, how would we go about? Any ideas on that, Kostas?
Yes, please allow me to wear my institutional hat on and remove my epsilon hat in order to answer the question. So I'm speaking as an executive officer in one institutional body in shipping. I have been the former chairman of the Recruitment and Training Committee in IMEC, and I'm currently a director in its executive committee. So I have seen all the actions, the background actions, and the efforts that have taken place at a collective level, institutional level, supranational level in shipping. And I think, collectively speaking, the industry has done a lot. Yeah. However, there is always a question of coordination, because we have private initiative, and I'm sure that, the majority, I have seen that the vast majority of firms, at least the members in my organization, in IMEC, have done a lot to create a more smooth environment so that we can, for example, perform crew changes. But there is an element of coordination. The private initiative is fine, but at the end of the day, all those private initiatives need to be somehow coordinated at the collective level. And this is where the problem comes in. because we have conflicting demands, we have tensions, we have different approaches, different orientations. The purpose is different in many cases because different institutional bodies expect different things. So it is not easy, and a pandemic has this matter of urgency. We didn't have ample time ahead to plan for the future. We had to make an immediate response, to take immediate action, and this has been extremely difficult. So I don't agree with the comment as well. I think flag states and other institutional bodies have done a lot. Could they have done it earlier? Could they have done it in a more efficient way? Yes, definitely. And I agree with the complaints against, for example, IMO for the lack of initial responsiveness. But now that the pandemic has somehow reached its peak and we have a trajectory behind us to judge things, to evaluate things, I think collectively as an industry, we have responded very, very well and very efficiently. However, the challenges that Aziz mentioned remain, and we need to make sure that these problems in relation to the actual health and well-being of seafarers are not there anymore. We need to address them as a matter of priority, because the fear is that many young people especially will not see this as an attractive career trajectory, and that's the main concern that I have for the future. So it's not about the immediate reaction of the industry. I'm happy with it. I'm just concerned about the longer term prospects in terms of the overarching employment prospects in the global shipping community, especially among young people.
Yeah. No, I think we are aligned there, Kostas, on the flag state. So I thought I would round up our session by asking all of you, Henrik, do you see the light in the tunnel? You're muted again, Henrik. Henrik, you're unmuted.
Sorry, I start again. So yes, I think there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Hopefully not another train coming against us. But as I say, we are from Eastern European point of view, vaccines are generally available, and the ones who want to be vaccinated can be vaccinated. And also we see now that there was a non-willingness to be vaccinated at the beginning here, but in the last couple of months, the curve of joining seafarers who are vaccinated is up, and I think that will be solved in the next couple of months actually. So we will get the vaccinated people on board, as crew on board. I think this is the first problem, the first thing. But then come a timing problem, because if everybody need a booster vaccination after 6 months, he should get his vaccination very close to the joining then maybe, yeah. So that's the next challenge we will have. This is booster vaccinations, I guess, and to get the timing right.
Yeah. Praveen, what about your tunnel? How's the light there?
I think the companies that spend time building relationship with their seafarers, they are still very positive. There are, for ship management companies, there have been a lot of opportunities. You might have realized a lot of ship management companies actually grew in size tremendously during this pandemic, because they were seen as some kind of experts, or at least having access to wider range of seafarers, a wider base. So from the seafarers perspective, if we look at the light at the end of the tunnel, which means how easy it is going to be to go on board and come back on time, I think it has become easier than what it was. Is it going to end anytime soon? It may not, but the way the vaccinations are going and the way the support is coming, many countries are providing vaccination to seafarers visiting the airports. So I think this is all very positive. I think the industry has really come together to tackle this problem, and I'm still very positive.
Thank you. And then I'll try and wrap up in 30 seconds, but with the past hour we've had, that is quite challenging. But I think we all can agree that this is not going away. This will be with us in the foreseeable future. It will be a higher cost for owners and principals. And then I think we will be challenged in the future on how we can make this new COVID cost equation into a sensible understanding for our principles, then as an industry working together, finding standards, protocols that can be worldwide accepted, and not least having a World Health Organization with a corona passport that maybe is accepted by all. But there are challenges with a number of various vaccines being accepted, non-accepted, having booster vaccines for our sailors, having to take vaccines again. So there is no easy answer to this question, and 1 hour is far too less. But that's why I hope we can physically meet again and use much more than 1 hour in doing this. So Henrik, Kostas, Ashish, Praveen, thank you very much. Take care, stay safe, and I hope to see you soon.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Torben, and thank you to all our panelists today. And a special thank you to all of you for tuning in. There's some great interactivity today, lots of questions. I know we didn't get a chance to get to all of them, but hopefully you'll be able to connect with the speakers individually in due course. We've got just over another hour of great content for you today, so please do stick around and watch. And don't forget to browse the platform, make connections between you, find new people to speak to, and take some time to see what our sponsors can do to really help your business. Coming up next, ATPI and Qatar Airways bring us a great session looking at digitalization in crewing.